Hello, welcome. We'll start with the poem, a poem, The Mockingbird by Charles Bukowski. The mockingbird had been following the cat all summer, mocking, 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 teasing and cocksure. The cat crawled under rockers on porches, tail flashing, and said something very angry to the mockingbird, which I did not understand. Yesterday, the cat walked calmly up the driveway with the mockingbird alive in its mouth. Wings fanned, beautiful wings fanned and flopping, feathers parted like a woman's legs in sex. And the bird was no longer mocking. It was asking. It was praying, but the cat, striding down through centuries, would not listen. I saw it crawl under a yellow car with the bird to bargain it to another place. Summer was over. The Mockingbird by Charles Bukowski. Hello, welcome. I am Imogen. I am streaming. I am live. We are here to talk about nothing other than, well, many other things, but primarily to talk about poetry and words and all of those beautiful things that we try to contain within the stroke of a pen. And I didn't plug in one of my other webcams, so I definitely need to do that. But it's totally gonna rock the computer for a second. Okay, that will be relevant later. Okay, we love words. We do love words. They, in all of their imperfection, in all of their ability to lead us toward incredible misunderstanding and miscommunication, we still love them, right? Or we still use them, or we are still trapped within their sort of the reality of them. I'm not sure. Yeah. I mean, I've at least been writing a lot of words lately, and maybe that's something like loving them. Uh, love is a one of those words. I wrote a poem the other day that I think I'm gonna read because I can. Because I don't think we'll jump into reading chat's poetry super immediately. Mostly because there are very few people here. I wrote a poem called Big. You were me once. So tell me, how did you get here? Crawling on my arm, so small, so different. Tell me with your 6 legs and your mandible things and your tail part that you pick up, put back down as you walk. How did you get here, up to my shoulder where I can't see you anymore, like a part of me? Like, oh man, it'd be so cool if I could read my handwriting. Oh well. Like a part of me, like the beginning. Big. Arson, hello. It's been a very long while since you've been in chat. Welcome, hello. How is writing? How are things? How is existence? And I suppose I can throw that same question toward you, Nikki. I've of course been seeing your daily writing prompts most days on Instagram. I think Instagram tends to prioritize those on my feed because I tend to like them, and I don't usually like any other posts. Um, and those are always nice to read. Um, but my writing, my reading, everything has been going well. I've been doing a lot of uh, analyzing poetry on my own time. I've been writing a lot. I've been pondering new and lovely ideas that have been carrying me forward with a considerable amount of force, which is nice. Existence is okay, but exams are draining me, and I have written one bad poem. Don't call it bad. I mean, you can call it bad. It's your poem. We can call things good and bad within our own perspective and view, right? But it might not be bad. I might not think it would be bad. Uh, you know, badness is badness. Believe me, it's bad. um, I can't just. I mean, I can believe that you think it's bad. That's very easy to believe. Um, there's nothing wrong with that. Um, but I won't believe that from a textual perspective. Uh, just off of that word of mouth. I think all my poems are bad. See, yeah, exactly. Hey Ray, welcome. Yeah, I think that's a fairly common thing for artists, right? To sort of dislike everything we create. That's not the case for everyone, certainly. And I certainly have things that I do like that I've made, although they are few and they are far between. Um, but right, art is this sort of continual pursuit, this continual creation, and often so rooted in the moment in which we create. And so, as we sort of plow forward in time, we're always iterating on the past. We're always revising upon ourselves and upon our own notion of what art is and can be, right? So, it it's often the case that we look back and we say that that those prior versions of us could not capture things as well, and all of that. I have my poetry exam on Tuesday, actually, and I got moved teachers, and he likes poetry, and he gets it. That makes me so happy, Arson. Um, that makes me so happy because, um, one, the fact, right, that there is a teacher that you found that does like poetry and he gets it, and maybe he likes yours, and it's really really valuable to have someone proximate, who is supportive and who is also sort of able to teach, right? I think a lot about this notion of like mentorship and having someone to teach you, to teach me things, to be this sort of older, wiser voice. And I think those are very important people to find, and especially in a world where like college, higher education grows increasingly impersonal, and oftentimes doesn't really support the needs of the individual student. Um, having an individual, having a mentor, having someone to help guide, to be supportive, to like your shit, right? That's cool. um, I have waves of whether I like my words or not. Yeah, yeah, these things come and go. I mean, these sort of patterns of existence. I've certainly experienced that before, right? Times of really appreciating one's own work, my own work, and being like, yeah, this is awesome, and then sort of catapulting back into a something very very far away from that. So I don't think that's uncommon either. And I think what's important, is the best thing is when you notice those waves, like when we notice the patterns and the waves in our lives, we're able to um, not feel so caught by them in the moment, I think. right? If we know that the hating all of the poetry is just part of the pattern, part of part of our life's, sort of going up and going down, then we can feel assured that at some point soon, we'll like the poetry again, or those kinds of things. Of course, it's hard, right, in that moment of just not liking the poetry, not liking the words, to remember that maybe we once did like it and we might like it again, right? Um, he's one of the coolest people ever. I am so sad I am leaving school on Friday and I have to leave him. Well, yes, you're leaving school. I don't think you have to leave him as a teacher. If he's been very helpful to you and a very great teacher, right? Um, I would strongly encourage you to, like, once you graduate, like, send an email and be like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Here's some more of my, writing if you keep writing. And um, keeping that sort of contact, and like genuinely maintaining that. Because those people who support us and who are, the coolest teacher ever, they do not come by often. I can tell you this as, someone with a few more years in education than you. They don't come by often. And those people that we resonate with, if we, let them disappear and let them, you know, fall into the oblivion of forgetting, then that sucks, right? You genuinely might never find someone like that. I don't know how, um, the nature of how much they support your art, or but it sounds like you really look up to this person. So, just because you're leaving school doesn't mean you can't send an email. And I think teachers, right, teachers want to, um, make an impact on their students, and I think you, like, maintaining that communication would be a really valuable thing for him as well. For him, I think you said him. Yeah. Uh, because, like, that supersedes the normal classroom teaching. That's like, now he gets to, pass knowledge, um, in a way that goes beyond, just the classroom. I have a college professor who I email fairly regularly, and I sent him, you know, the big document for my poetry workshop, and he looked through it, and we just talk about books and writing and life, and it's a very valuable thing to have. Um, so, I'd encourage you to not let that disappear, right, Asher? Um, when Ray hears poetry exam, I think of those stories by Valdecassas or Menendez and Pelayo, where their teacher made him memorize whole poems, like a long ass poem, and went like first stanza, okay, sixth stanza, 15th stanza. That's crazy. No joke, that's like the exam. That's wild. Poetry exam, memorizing, and uh, um, yeah. I mean, that's cool. It's very good to be able to memorize things well. I think memorization is a very, like, useful skill as an artist, right? Just, you don't, memorizing. It's in your head. It's there. It's locked in. And if you don't let it slip away, then you sort of have that thing in your brain forever. Um, it's very cool to be able to, rattle off a poem, and those things that are memorized. That means that they are deeply ingrained in our minds, right? More so than something we just read once or twice. And that means, like, some of those things, some of those words, those techniques, um, those things we've memorized, right? They will start to, bleed into our own work. They become second nature, and that's very cool. My poetry final was a poetry workshop, and it was brutal. Teaching workshops is so fun, Nikki. Um, that's like I love it. Don't say it's brutal. I mean, no, it can be brutal for you, and they are very hard. They are very intimidating. To place oneself in the role of teacher, to place oneself in the role of like authority and having knowledge and speaking confidently and like making a point and like feeling like people are just like staring through you. It's hard. It's hard, but it's very valuable. And I think teaching is a great way to learn. Memory is great. I've not. Yeah. Jenny, I low key want your help on one of my poems if you have nothing planned today because I don't know what to make of it at all. Um, yeah, I mean, in terms of submissions, like the majority of the things submitted are people who aren't in chat right now, and we read a lot of Nikki and Ray, right? I think we're due for some Ray soon, but I would certainly be willing to read some uh read some Arson Asher 69. um we had to workshop our own poem we had been working on all quarter. I see. That's I guess that's different, right? I guess workshop has many definitions. It's sort of a dumb word, I think, right? Workshop, because we have like workshops like the Iowa Writers Workshop, which is basically like a glorified MFA program. And then we have like workshop, like come to my 2 hour long poetry workshop where I teach you about something. And then we have like workshopping, which is just like the, uh, sort of short term act of like working together on an individual piece to improve it. So, not the greatest. um, Not the greatest term, I think, right? Um, yeah, but Asher, if you put your poem in the Discord, I think we can read it today. I mean, there are definitely uh, a number of people who have had things waiting for a while, but also a lot of people don't pull up. So if no one pulls up, then they don't get to read their poem, and that's just how it goes, right? I cannot help people who don't show up. Uh, which it's a whole thing, right? A whole thing. Um, yeah, I have very little to like yap about. I mean, I have little to yap about. I think because I was up. I wasn't really up late last night, but I was up kind of late last night. Um, like really, I was not up. I guess I woke up early, right? So that's sort of like being up late. um, but but um yeah, we had a punk show last night. The band had a show last night. So, and we opened, so we weren't playing that late, but it's just like a tiring thing. And then I woke up early and I've been like working on some stuff this morning, editing and social media stuff that I'm doing for other people, I guess. Um, it's sort of an interesting trade-off, like doing social media stuff for others and editing people's poetry manuscripts and like this is nice, and then I'm like, man, I totally could like be doing this with my own social media and manuscripts and like probably um like furthering my own artistic things. Like my social media has just been like dead for so long and I probably should be using it more intentionally. Um so anyway, I'm tired, right? The show went well. I played very well. I continue to get better and sound better, so that was good, right? Okay, you're sending a poem by someone else, by Imtiaz Darker. This poem is not by me, but I don't know what to say if this is brought up in my exam. Okay. Um, yes, the old classic tradition of doing Asher's homework on stream. um, so I actually learned my first song on guitar today. That's super awesome. That's very cool. So I take it that you have a number of a number of poems that you've had to like maybe analyze and come up with coherent thought, um, for this exam, right? Okay, there's 15. Um, there's 15 poems on the anthology. You've only done two others. Okay, that's not so bad. That's not so bad. And either way, it's all subjective, and I'm just here to give my own thoughts, and you need to form your own thoughts independent of that, regardless. And I won't stand for you parroting my opinions because they're mine. They're my. I mean, not that I'm so interested in notions of ownership, but I am interested in the notion of you forming your own independent artistic critical thought because um if I'm not encouraging people to do that, then yeah. No one has thoughts about this poem in my school, no teachers or anything. Okay, so like no one can figure this out. Um that's fun. That's fun. Um so now I can do this, right? I need to charge for the homework service. I don't need to charge shit. um, I, no. I mean, that's kind of funny, right? I will do your, I will help you with your English homework live on Twitch. That'd be really funny. Um, should I pivot the whole channel um, to supporting a helpless AI coddled uh high schoolers? That'd be really funny. Or it's like genuine teaching masqueraded as I'll do your homework for you. 2/3 of your homework completed. There you go. You'll get at least a 67% guaranteed. Uh, maybe making guarantees is a bad thing because nothing is guaranteed, but that'll be 1,000 bits, please, right? Um, yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like with the reading of people's poetry, of course, I never want it to have to be behind something like subscriptions or bits because I think it's cool that someone can just kind of show up and be like, "Hey, can I send you my poem?" And uh, there's no like wall to that, right? But yeah, maybe for the I'll take a look at your English homework. Uh, I'd probably get way more literate than I am now, like well read. Like there's so many like high schoolers be reading so many great texts, right? That I just haven't read. So that'd be good for me. No, please, guys, I'm broke. No, 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 no. I'm not charging you, Asher. But everyone is always welcome. Everyone is always welcome. After I spend multiple hours reading their things to like send some bits, right? Like, um, right. As a show of gratitude, but this stream is a gift giving economy where I give the gift of my time and knowledge and thought, and at least I mean people sending their poems is sort of giving me the gift of having something to talk about and use as a vessel to teach and to improve my own art. Um, and there are people who sub, so you know they give the gift of monetary support. Not I don't really need it though, right? Like I'm not strapped for like I live with my parents. I don't have expenses. Anyway, let's see if we can figure out this poem, the poem that the teachers can't figure out. See if I can do better than Asher's entire school system or entire school, perhaps. Maybe the whole school system. I don't know. Uh, I would if I could. I'm a broke high school student. Well, when you make it big as an author or something, as a poet, and you get those multi-million-dollar advances for your luminary uh, books of poetry, Asher, then you can come give me 10 subs, and we'll be even. Seems fair. All right. Should we read poetry? Should we do the thing? Should we do the thing that I do, that I say that I do? One sub for every poem read. There you go. All right. This is called Tissue by Imtiaz Darker. I'm gonna look him up. I like vaguely recognize this name. Who is calling me? Ellie is calling me? That's kind of important. I'm editing. Oh, is this contemporary? She's British. Okay, I have to answer the phone, but you guys can hear my side of it. Hello. I am good. How are you? Yeah, I mean, I worked for like an hour and a half on it. Yeah. Oh, hi, Jesus. I am great. How are you? Oh yeah, for sure. Um, I mean, I'm good at it, so it works. So far, I have edits done up through, um, I think I got through, what's the first section called? Weird Heavy? And maybe a couple into section two. Okay. Okay, so there are a couple new poems in section two. Cool. And then nothing else has changed though. Okay. Perfect. Yeah, I will try to have all the edits done and send it to you like s- tomorrow before noon is the plan because you'll need to have some time to like implement those before you send it off on Monday. Cool. All good? Yep. All right. Have a good one. That is me editing a poetry manuscript as I mentioned very briefly a second ago. And she sent me this manuscript, my friend, right? That she's making this book for her friend. So it's a friend of a friend's book. Um, she sent it to me on the 13th, which was 3 days ago, right? And I start working on it yesterday. I do a little bit more work today. And then I call my friend and I'm like, yo, I have a question about like the editing and what I should be like focusing on or whatever. And then she's like, "Yeah, it needs to be done on Monday. Like, like we need to send our manuscript in for this book on Monday." And I'm like, girl, I have, um, that means I have basically one day because I should get it to her tomorrow so she can make the edits, like implement them to their final manuscript. To edit a manuscript, to copy edit a manuscript that has like 80 poems. Um, it's sort of absurd, the turnaround, um, but I will do it. I might ask her to pay me a little more than she initially said she was gonna pay me because that was a bit of a surprise. But it's okay. 80, yeah. I mean, I'm basically just checking like spelling, punctuation, grammatical things, formatting, which like I mean, here's the thing. I read like I've never done this before, this like copy editing stuff, but I read so much poetry, um, right, because of stream, with a critical eye that just sitting there and like not having to understand it and just going like, oh, that word is spelled wrong, right? Because I mean, I don't even usually mention those things on stream. Like sometimes I'll be reading through a poem and it'll be like the most absolute like sort of incomprehensible grammar sometimes in the occasional poem on stream. And I'm like, this can't be right, but like I'm also not here on stream to copy edit people's poems, right? Um, so sort of the experience of actually just going through that is very like it's just very like menial repetitive work, which is like super within the scope of what I can do. So it's not so bad. Um, and I just sort of sit there like reading out loud in a monotone to like make sure I'm seeing exactly every word and how it's spelled. Uh, it's very chill. Anyway, so we're reading a poem, and we're reading a poem. Oh, you said right. Imogen versus the school system. That gives the people versus Larry Flynn vibes. Yeah. Um, it gives. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Imtiaz darker, 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 dar. Anyway, Pakistani British poet, artist, video filmmaker. She won the Queen's Gold Medal for her English poetry. Appointed the Chancellor of Newcastle University. Okay, so she's like a real academic. Hosted the largest poetry festival ever staged in the UK. Okay, bringing together poets from all the competing Olympic nations. The Culture Olympiad. That's sick. Do we not do that anymore? Um, that's really cool. Born in Lahore. Grew up in Glasgow. Blood Axe books. I have work of another poet published by Blood Axe Books, um, Clara Skew, who I used in my poetry workshop, and um, we've read on stream at least a couple times. That's kind of crazy that I recognize like independent British poetry publishers. um, considered for the position of poet laureate. Um, cool. Very little else. Very little else. That's fine. Ah, um, one of the poet artists in the poet slash artist exhibition curated by the poet Lehman Sisse. I actually have a book curated by Lehman Sisse. This book, The Fire People, and Lehman Sisse was the first poet whose poetry I ever really liked, because he wrote a piece with a that was electronics and spoken word with saxophone quartet, and I played that piece with a saxophone quartet in high school. The connections. What a small world of contemporary British poets. Um, fucking. So my that's like my crazy obscure knowledge for the day. All of that stuff that I just said. The original Olympic Games had a poetry category. The Hesiod. There, Hesiod won against Homer. That's crazy. That's super cool. I mean, so we have things like these giant global exhibitions of like visual arts. Like I think right now, the Venice Biennale is happening, right? Which is like the biggest art fair in the world, and it happens every few years or every year. I'm not sure. Um, and I feel like we don't have that with poetry. There's no like massive international celebration of the literary arts, really, um, in the same way that there is, you know, the Venice Biennale, or there's probably some music things that I'm not thinking of. Anyway, just my stream. Yeah, my stream is the international celebration of the literary arts. If only we had like all the best poets in the world coming through these doors. I mean, y'all are pretty great. I don't know what best means anyway. Y'all are the best because you show up to my streams, right? Um, okay, so we are reading another British poet. I think all of these in this anthology that you have for your assignment, Asher, are British, because I remember we've read a number of British poets so that you've sent. I imagine that's the case. Um, so yeah, let's actually read the poem. Let's get back on track. Here's Tissue by Imtiaz Darker. Paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. Paper thinned by age or touching. The kind you find in well-used books. The back of the Quran, where a hand has written in the names and histories who was born to whom. The height and weight, who died where and how, on which sepia date, pages smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention. If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift, see how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. Maps, too. The sun shines through their borderlines, the marks that rivers make, roads, rail tracks, mountain folds. Find slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold, and what was paid by credit card might fly our lives like paper kites. An architect could use all this. Place layer over layer, luminous script over numbers over line, and never wish to build again with brick or block, but let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths, through the shapes that pride can make. Find a way to trace a grand design with living tissue. Oh, that's so clever. Okay, with living tissue. I really like this poem. Raise a structure never meant to last, of paper smoothed and stroked, and thinned to be transparent, turned into your skin. Oh. Okay, this poem's really cool. This is super, super clever and like super dense. Yeah, everyone hates this. It's really tricky. It's very it's very vague and evocative, right? It has this we're looking through many subtly transparent sheets, and I think the meaning is somewhere behind that. Um, but I love it. I love it. Um, the imagery, so much imagery. The extended metaphor is gorgeous, right? Yeah. Um, no, but this is a tricky poem. I understand it. I understand why that like everyone is struggling with this. Um, yeah, because I'm English, guys, and English people famously hate everyone else. Yeah. Um, okay. Wow. Tissue. This with living tissue. What a moment. How brilliant. Um, just lovely, so delicate. Um, where do we start? I think we start by reading it again. We just read it again. Uh, I'm not going to underline things. I just want to read this again because I really enjoy it. Paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. Paper thinned by age or touching. The kind you find in well-used books. The back of the Koran, where a hand has written the names and histories of who was born to whom, the height and weight, who died where and how, on which sepia date, pages smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention. If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. See how easily they fall away on a sigh and shift in the direction of the wind. Maps, too. The sun shines through their borderlines, the marks that rivers make, roads, rail tracks, mountain folds. Find slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card might fly our lives like paper kites. An architect could use all this, place layer over layer, luminous script over numbers over line, and never wish to build again with brick or block, but let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths, through the shapes that pride can make, find a way to trace a grand design with living tissue, raise a structure never meant to last, of paper smoothed and stroked, and thinned to be transparent, turned into your skin. Okay, so now this poem really like hits me in the chest. And now the tricky thing is gonna be to breaking down why that is. You know, this feeling that it gives, right? Um, and I'm afraid that, you know, right, I'll give this explanation, and will the explanation be enough, right, to sort of help get you, Asher, to feel this poem in the way I do? Maybe, maybe not, right? Um, but that's the tricky thing, because this is going to be an explanation born out of a feeling. Um, and as you go to explain this poem, or as you go to think about this poem, um, you know, potentially on your exam, which I hope you get asked about it. You know, maybe your teacher is the type who knows that um, you're maybe one of the people in your class who really likes poetry, so he'll give you the challenging poem um, that no one likes. Um, but I hope that you'll be able to understand it, but then also maybe um, feel from it and feel it, because if not, then we sort of end up approximate at the end of the day. Um, so where do I start? Where do I start? Um, there are a number of. So I guess I'll start with the end, because this is the thing that really stuck out to me. This ending, right? And sometimes starting at the end, or just starting at the place that is densest in that um, in that emotion, in that feeling, is useful. And what hit me in the chest was with living tissue, right? I stopped reading on the first read, snapping. I was like, oh, that's amazing. Right? So why did I do this? Why? And it's because of the double meaning of tissue, right? That was so bafflingly perfect, right? Tissue, as in, right, one definition, thin paper. What's our other definition of tissue? I'm sure one of you can tell me. What else can tissue be? And it's sort of given away in the rest of this poem here. What else is tissue beyond paper that is creating our double meaning? I'm gonna be a teacher here. Uh, yeah, we have tissue as paper, tissue as thin paper, which I didn't write, and tissue as skin. Yes, um, tissue, skin, right? The things, the layers of flesh that make up our body, right? And even tissue, I think, can refer to like the different things in our body. Like I think muscle is a form of tissue. I'm not exactly sure. But right, we have it here at the end. We have skin and we have paper smoothed and stroked, right? And the beautiful thing, right? We start with our title, tissue. And immediately we say, paper that lets the light shine through. So we've defined this poem, right? Muscle, sinew, skin are all tissues. Awesome. We've defined what this poem is about, right? We're given we're given a definition through our title and our first two lines. And that is that this is a poem about paper, right? And so we go on to like elaborate paper, right? Paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. And we pique our interest, right? Because we say like alter things. Like what does that mean? I read this the first time and I'm like, "Oh, what do you mean?" Right? Alter what? How? Right? We're already asking questions. And then we don't answer, right? We don't answer at all. And maybe we start, so we create tension through this action. When we ask a question, not even ask a question, we're not asking a question. We're leaving something unexplained. And this is such a beautiful thing to do in a poem. Make a vague statement that's precise enough to get us questioning, to get us thinking, to get us wanting to know, and then to delay that gratification, right? This is the term, poetic edging, right? Which I have used before on stream, and I think is the uh, the only appropriate term for this. So this poem begins with this denial, perhaps, uh, and is what could alter things. Okay, paper thinned by age or touching, the kind you find in well-used books. We forge on, we're talking about paper. We just leave this like vastly evocative statement just hanging in the air, right? Like it's diabolical. It's truly diabolical. Okay, the kind you find in well-used books, the back of the Quran where a hand has written in the names and histories of who was whom. So now we just start to go into this really extended, we'll say like imagery section, right? Pretty much here to here. We're just doing paper imagery, right? We're just describing the paper. And this sort of reiterates our definition. Oh, we're just talking about paper. And you can almost like maybe start to forget about this tension that's sitting underneath the poem, because we're like, oh, we're talking about paper. That's right. That's what's going on here. But we're also slowly elaborating on like the value of this, like what it means, why it's important, because we have set that precedent. It's what could alter things. It's important in some way. We give weight to this light and delicate thing, and that's a really nice juxtaposition that sort of immediately happens, right? It could alter things. It could have weight. It could have impact. This light, delicate, thing that tears, gets thinned just by a touch, right? It could alter things. So we have this juxtaposition, right? Because there's that, and then it's against like paper. Something that doesn't alter, something that gets marked upon, something that, is blank. The kind you find in well-used books, in the back of the Quran, where a hand has written the names and histories of who was born to whom. The height and weight, who died where and how, on which sepia date, page smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention. So we have this notion of like paper as something that can connect people through time, right? Not only with like the hands, right? Smoothed and stroked over time, many people turning the pages of this same book, this Quran that's tying people together, but also bringing us to history and religion and community and connection, right? Paper. We also have just like beautiful sound. Like this poem is gorgeous, right? Paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. Paper thinned, things thinned, paper thinned, paper thin, Like we have all of these like really nested by age or touching. The kind you find in well-used books, the back books back the Quran where a hand, right back hand has, written in names and histories, has histories who, was born to whom, right? So we're just alliterating and rhyming and slant rhyming and assonance and consonants, like all over the place. The height and weight. Who died, where, and how, right? Height and weight, where and how. So we have this sort of like duplicities. And then we have this on which sepia date, right? Um, what a beautiful way to describe that. Pages smoothed and stroked, turned transparent, right? So we create this whole theme within this section, the height and weight. And this even comes in from who to whom, the height, the weight, the where, the how, the sepia date, the pages smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention, right? And it resolves onto that single word, period. The end of the whole idea, right? This is one sentence. The kind you find in well-used books, the back of the Quran, where a hand has written the names and histories, who was born to whom, the height and weight, who died where and how, on which sepia date, pages smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention. Right? You can't say it all in one breath. There's so much here. It's so bursting and full of value and thought. I think one of the problems in the exam is you have to compare it with one other poem and say how it shows power or conflict. I think this does show power and conflict. Um, like this one definitely does. And we'll get there. I think it brings in power and conflict in the notion of maps, in the notion of, these capitals and monoliths, structures, the idea of things lasting, pride, um, and then even like religion, perhaps. Um, but we'll get there. um, because this is an incredibly subtle and an incredibly veiled way, I think, to talk about um, power structures and modern society and all of that. Ozymandias by Percy Bysshe Shelley, London by William Blake, Extract from the Prelude by William Wordsworth, My Last Duchess. My Last Duchess. We read that so long ago, Asher. Uh, Charge of the Light Brigade by Tennyson, Exposure by Wilfred Storm, The Island by Seamus Heaney, Bayonet Charge, Ted Hughes. So many classics. Remains by Simon Armitage, which I think we also read on stream, right? Oh, that one was so good. Yeah. Poppies by Jane Weir. War Photographer by Carol Ann Duffy. I've heard of that poem. Tissue by Mithas Darker. And The Emigre by Carol Rumens. Kamikaze by Beatrice Garland. Checking Out Me History by John A. That's cool. So that's like your list of poems for this assignment. That's a really great selection. I mean, it takes us like so far back and then so far into modern. And yeah, this notion of conflict throughout, right? Ozymandias, My Last Duchess, right? Boat stealing. Makes sense, right? Bayonet Charge. That's kind of cool. Remains was like a war poem. War Photographer. Yeah. That's cool. Anyway. Transparent with attention. So, and I think like this opening to the poem is like fairly understandable, maybe, right? Like we're talking about the beauty of paper and the way that it sort of gains this value over time, through history, through the iteration upon it, right? And then I think maybe there are people, maybe even you, Asher, would be able to understand this, right? This notion of paper, or like maybe some people in your classes or your teachers would like get to this part, right? Oh yeah, paper, time, iteration, whatever, this like slow and gentle change, history, cool, right? Family, connection, religion, those are all very present. But then we're like, if buildings were paper, and I think this is the part where like many readers would probably be thrown for that loop. Like, what? What do you mean if buildings were paper? What do you mean buildings and maps? And why are we talking about grocery store receipts now? Why are we talking about an architect using these things to build, right? How did we get here? What is going on? What's the connection, right? And I think this is something really nice is this maintains the tension that is initially established in the poem, right? We create this tension about, altering things. And we start to place paper in these unexpected spaces, right? We start to place paper as buildings, and we start to like bring in these things we might not have expected after our like beautiful old family Quran, kind of section, right? So we keep the reader a bit uncertain as we go forward. And if buildings were paper, right? If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. See how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. Now, on our first read, this doesn't really mean very much to us, right? This buildings were paper. We're kind of like flying through this, reading the poem, and we're like, hold on, buildings, paper. If they were, why are we talking about buildings as paper? Of course, on a second read, we get this lovely sort of connection to the end, right? And this is a really cool thing that this poem does, is it rewards another read, right? It rewards, we'll say, smoothing the pages with continued attention. It rewards using this poem well, because we get this sort of answer before we get the question, right? Um, in a sense, right? Or we get the conclusion before we get the premise. And the presence is an architect creating buildings of paper later, building things instead of from brick or block, instead of trying to create these, great monuments of pride that last, right? Instead is this buildings of paper, right? That doesn't maybe make sense until a second read. Um, but if buildings were paper, this says, which also says that buildings are not paper. Buildings are not paper because they do not drift in the wind, right? Because they do not fall over with a sigh, because they do not shift, right? They are sturdy. They are stable. They are still, sturdy, stable, whatever. Interesting that those all start with sta. Um, right. We're characterizing buildings as not like paper. Do I want some context? No, I think I'm I'm chilling here. Um, we can have context later, but um, buildings are stable, right? Buildings are not paper. Buildings do not fall over. But if they were, right? If they were, they would have this beauty to them, right? She is describing all of these paper-like things as incredibly beautiful, right? Like they have this gentle drift, right? Falling away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. These are just really like lovely, kind of rich descriptions of something peaceful, of something calm. And we're placing buildings, right? We're placing these creations of man outside the sort of delicate beauty of paper. And we'll just leave it at that, right? Because that'll be useful when we come to this part. Maps 2. The sun shines through their borderlines. And what an incredible line, right? So we're talking about the sort of um, the perceived, stability, sturdiness, the creation of man against the sort of delicate nature of paper, right? Maps to the sun shines through their borderlines. And I think this is the first big thing in the poem that, like, maybe tips us off exactly to what we're talking about, right? Borderlines, a structure, a concept, an imposition created by man onto the world, and something that we consider very, like, we accept borders. We sort of have this, I don't know, like a priori acceptance of borders in our lives. Um, a priori is a philosophy term that sort of is like sort of like this like face value self justification. Like we don't like it's just there, I guess. Maybe it's not the perfect word to use. Um, but it's sort of this like intuitive acceptance. Um, we have this acceptance of borderlines. But the sun shines through the paper, right? It shows these things as transparent. Because all that we're creating, right, when we create borders, when we create maps, when we create buildings, are these like transparent pieces of humanity that exist upon something greater and are fundamentally as rivers, roads, rail tracks, and mountain folds, impermanent. And I think that's the theme that jumps out from this stanza that starts to recontextualize or starts to explain all of this. That starts to explain, altering things, right? That starts to tie everything together. This idea of impermanence, that like paper is delicate and things, right, will fall away on the wind. Um, but we still don't quite have the connection. Still don't quite have the connection between like the buildings and all of this and the Quran, right? Because we have these ideas of like connection and family and this really tight woven web, right? Something that is very strong here. This history passed down through books. There's a strength here, right? Alter things, paper, strength, not strength, impermanence, permanence, connection, right? Um, Still trying to figure out how these things sort of come together. A professor I follow on YouTube once said that for him, books, those bricks of paper that torment me, movies too, those bricks in the case of VHS tapes and CDs are also books. Paintings are flat books. Sculptures are 3D books. Globes are round books. And he went on like that. So everything is books for him, all paper and text. That's interesting. And I think that feels in some way very similar to this poem. Um, I wouldn't argue that this poem is trying to describe everything as books, but I think it's a similar notion. Um, Fine slips from grocery shops, right? We're truly going all over the place in terms of imagery, as long as we're staying with thin paper, right? But we have like maps, abstract representations of the world. We have like books, these sort of like shared things. We have buildings which just aren't paper. And then we have fine slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card might fly our lives like paper kites. Fine slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card might fly our lives like paper kites. This is a tricky stanza, too. Right. What does it mean for something to fly our lives? And what does this mean to say, this might fly our lives? Is that saying that it does, or it may in the present, or it could in the future, right? Fly has this sort of ambiguity of present or future, um, which is really neat here. Um, but right, so we start with another fine paper from grocery stores. We're talking about receipts, right? That say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card. I think the use of credit card is really interesting here, um, particularly because there's a choice here to not use like cash, right? Um, to not use paper, and I guess maybe you don't get you get a receipt when you pay with cash, right? Um, right. So we're not using paper for payment. We're using like this plastic payment, which is kind of neat. Um, but these fine slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid. And this has some echo of before. This has some echo of like this, um, who was born to whom, how much was sold and what was paid, right? Where and how on which sepia date. It almost rhymes exactly. Um, these sort of lines have this sonic connection. Uh, in a way, maybe this speaks to some kind of history, but it feels much thinner than that one. This back here feels rich. This sort of well-worn paper, this thing used again and again. Where like these receipts, right? We probably like throw them away, and they are this impermanent thing, right? They are this fragile, ephemeral item that sort of acts as this representation of actual goods, of something actually happening, right? Of money being exchanged for goods. Interesting thing is that we also abstract money here, where we don't use cash. So there's maybe this representation of sort of an abstraction of like the realities of our life. This sort of moving away from uh it feels untethered from reality. And then we get this like flying our lives like paper kites, right? These things floating in the wind, which I mean really nicely ties back to this direction of the wind kind of thing. Um, but it's maybe almost to say that like there feels like a notion, there feels like an implication of losing touch to reality itself. It's an interesting choice to use plastic as a metaphor in a poem that only has paper when cash has paper. Yeah, it's such a fascinating choice. And this stanza is very, very tricky. But the credit card, right, is an example of like moving away from paper to something other, to something like sturdier, right? In the same way of like the buildings being brick when they sort of we've implied could be paper. Like there's like a tonal connection between these things of like the choice to use something um, sturdy, something that lasts forever. And plastic does last fucking forever, right? Plastic doesn't really degrade. In some capacity, the credit card is almost more enduring than like the house, the building, than like the mountain folds, right? The credit card has been made and will never leave. It will sit on this earth for the next like 100,000 years, slowly degrading, and even only then into like microplastics. Um, and I think there is something very, like, I think there is a big theme of like environmentalism in this poem, um, right? Uh, might not be entirely evident at face value, but we have this like notion of impermanence. We have this notion of like connection as people. We have this notion of permanence, right? And I think there's some even environmentalism um, happening here. There's also pride, which comes up later, right? Um, but credit cards lose available value as we use them. Yeah. Um, I also think of like credit cards as this like not real money, right? Like the transaction is happening somewhere that we cannot see, somewhere non-existent. This sort of like unseeable thing that runs our lives, right? This idea of like flying our lives, um, sort of um, controlling us. Our lives are the kites; they are flying us in the wind. Um, so there's this notion of being like ruled by money. There's this notion, right? This suggestion of like capitalism here, and I think that exists in opposition to this notion of like close communal connection earlier. Um, but find slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold. I really think I don't know. I think this stanza maybe just speaks to how muddled everything feels, how out of touch with reality we are, that there's this layer of like plastic credit card and then this like glossy sort of thin paper um, to like represent just like the exchange of objects, of things. um, all of that's in there, you know, and we have to pay it back in the end. We get the goods, we haven't actually paid our price. Yeah, again, muddling, again, confusing. And again, this like flying our lives, right? Debt, credit. Um, yeah. This sort of like log of our actions. But we'll go forward for now, I think, from that stanza. An architect could use all this. Place layer over layer, luminous script over numbers over line, which is cool. That's like book over receipt over map, right? Um, and never wish to build again with brick or block, but let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths. And this calls back to the sun shines through borderlines, right? We have this direct connection of language um, to shine through. But let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths. So the suggestion, right? The idea, the architect would instead create capitals, instead create monoliths from paper. Through the shapes that pride can make, find a way to trace a grand design with living tissue. Right? So this is all one sentence. This is all unbroken. An architect could use all this, right? Do all these things. Find a way to trace a grand design with living tissue. Raise a structure never meant to last. Of paper smooth and stroked and thin to be transparent. Right. So the idea is an architect, instead of creating of stone, instead of creating things of brick, instead of building from things that try to fight against, right, sort of like the erosion of time, the architect could create things from layers of fragile substance, right? Um, all of these things we have before. And never wish to build again with brick or block, but let the daylight break through capitals and monoliths. So capitals and monoliths here, right? These are these symbols, right? These shapes that pride can make. And I think this speaks to like human arrogance, the desire to like make ourselves greater, right? To be right. I mean, this is like the most fundamental arrogance of man, right? To try to live beyond, right? To spit in the face of death itself and be remembered, right? This is sort of our arrogance. And the interesting thing, right? Um, there are many ways to be remembered. One is maybe to like build things of stone. The pyramids, right, still exist very much. Another way is to do so through paper, right? Um, Homer was mentioned earlier. We still have the Iliad and the Odyssey, um, through language, through these sort of like impermanent connections of hand to hand, people to people, communities, right? Carrying things on. Um, and I think that's really the idea, right? Not necessarily that we're talking about an architect, but we're talking about someone who desires to build, someone who desires to create anything, right? And when we create, we can create in this sort of grand, wasteful, arrogant um, manner, right? Where we build the biggest things that are testaments to our strength and ego, right? Where we say, I alone will sort of stand against time. Or rather than choosing your own ego, rather than choosing yourself as the thing to be remembered, right? You choose to remember through delicate and fragile connection, through paper smoothed and stroked and thin to be transparent, turned into your skin, right? Something passed from hand to hand through community, something that degrades, but something that, if cared for, can live on in like a more perfect way. We can think of something like the Odyssey, right? Homer, again, still existing in this very maybe authentic form, right? We still have the story and we still have the spirit of it. And we still have like the triumphs and failures and hubris and wisdom and cleverness of Odysseus, right? These things all still, we still have that. But then we think of something like the Great Pyramids of Giza, right? And I think people say that at one point they were like all plated with like fancy metal and carvings and like all this ornate stuff on them. And then over time they like continue to degrade and sort of fall apart and wear down, right? Be smoothed by time. And I think the suggestion here is really that like through living things, through things that are alive, you can preserve ideas, stories, yourself, um, in a way that is more precise, maybe more sustainable, sort of less egotistical, right? Inherently communal. Something that is alive, right? Something that is living tissue, right? Paper as living tissue, and then living tissue, our bodies, our human existence as paper, as something that carries history, right? Paper smoothed and stroked and thin to be transparent, turned into your skin, right? Um, so it's this notion that like permanence can be achieved through impermanence rather than attempting to create something strong, something that stands in front of death. You acknowledge the weakness, but also like the sort of flowing and nimble reality of being alive, and you use that to carry on. Um, it makes me think of a line from the Tao, um, the Tao Te Ching, um, or the Tao Te Ching, um, from the Tao, right? Um, and this line, it's about swords. Maybe I can just get my Tao. I can maybe find it. Um, course, my Tau is on the floor within arm's reach. um, I wonder if there's an index that I can like find this quickly. Probably not. Probably not. Yeah, not so much. Okay, let me try to find this part in the Tau, which might be difficult. Okay, that works. I mean, there's a number of things that work in the Tau. I actually want a better line, though. I am going to find the right line in the Tau, because I think it's really fitting here. Warriors, well, reason. It's about trying to keep a sword sharp. And if not, I'll use the other line that's less good, because that's okay too. It probably talks about this multiple times. When the government is unobtrusive, no. Governing in normalcy, no. Those blunt the sharpness. I mean, that's again sort of it. Subliminal virtue. Good construction does not fall down. I mean, that's sort of this poem is incredibly Tau. You know, maybe we will. There's an ad coming up, so we'll take the break, and I will find the line, and then we will come back to this poem. That's what I think we'll do. I'll be back in 3 minutes. Okay, I'm back. And I didn't find the exact line from the Tao that I was looking for. But I have a couple of sections that I think like relate to this poem and maybe relate to how I understand it, right? Um, Good construction does not fall down. A good embrace does not let go. Their heirs honor them unceasingly, right? The rest doesn't matter so much. Good construction does not fall down, right? Is that one? Um, Another part, um, the most flexible thing in the world. Nothing in the world is more flexible and yielding than water. Yet when it attacks the firm and the strong, none can withstand it, because they have no way to change it. So the flexible overcome the adamant, the yielding overcome the forceful. Everyone knows this, but no one can do it. This is why sages say those who can take on disgraces of nations are leaders of lands, etc. Right? So, another thing that the Tao says um, is basically that it is futile to try to keep a sword sharp, right? Or to have sharp swords, because they will naturally grow blunt. And then you find yourself needing to sharpen them again and again, right? And what the Tao prefers is something that is perfect. And the only thing that is perfect in the Tao, the closest thing to the Tao is water, right? Something that flows, something that is formless, something that cannot be controlled, something that does not try to remain inert. Because that which is inert, the Great Pyramid, the testament of human ego, right? The building, the monument, the capital, erodes over time. It degrades, it falls apart. Whereas something without form, something thin, something delicate, something like water, right, flows naturally and basically just does not, right, it does not try to hold itself with form. So I think this poem basically says the same thing about paper, right, and about tissue, about human skin, um, about this paper, is that something delicate, something that does not try to stand against time, something that is necessarily resigned to dying, right? Human tissue, something, paper that will degrade, becomes the greatest way to preserve. Because it is preserved through living connections, right? The well-used books, the hand-to-hand, the writing of histories, the slowly fading, but then life allows you to sort of continue to, replenish those things and preserve them and keep those stories going, right? And that's where we think again of like the Odyssey, the oral tradition, where we don't have the pyramid in its form as it was. And sure, the Odyssey, we've probably like lost things along the way, but this is so much more pure. This still communicates like the emotions and the meanings and the stories of this time, where this is just like a big triangle in the desert. Um, and I really think that's what this poem is saying, right? It says that human ego um, is, you know, I mean, it speaks against the sort of ego of man to try to create things, to create objects that are permanent. And instead, right, really dwells on the beauty of that which is impermanent. Arson, you redeemed me improvising a poem. I'll do it after we're done with this one, but I will do it. Um, yeah. Um, I think that's basically what I think about this poem. Um, is that and so we think about where conflict comes from, right? Because you mentioned that these poems are all sort of about conflict, right? Um, Conflict arises from these egos, these desires for like borders, things, permanence, having, right? Um, all of which are sort of this illusory thing that flies us like a kite, right? That flies our lives on a kite. Um, and what is real, what continues, what is actually preserved, right? is our connection and our stories. Thank you so much for helping, Jenny. And the context was it was written in an anthology about 9/11. Interesting, right? Okay, so this makes sense, right? We have the Quran, we have this idea of Islamophobia around 9/11. Um, and I think it all like still stands, right? We have this notion of like the fragility of buildings, right? What 9/11 is this like attack on this aggressor nation, America. A tragedy, of course, many lives lost. But something that speaks to the impermanence of life, the impermanence of the buildings that we create, um, the impermanence of the maps that we draw and the maps we draw in other countries. Um, and I think this, like, millennial turn, right? The credit card was this very new symbol at the time, right? I don't know when credit cards start. Um, but we sort of have this turn into a technological world, and all of this change, all of this confusion. Maybe that's why there's this feeling of confusion in this stanza. Um, but the poem invites us to return to humanity, to connection, to holding, hand in hand and skin touching skin and pages of books and these sort of like human histories, and also to see people as human, rather than right to see people as fragile and as human, um, and not as something more than that, not as like a nation of people who are villain, who are aggressor, um, uh, or right that these are like innocent people, um, and I'm thinking of this in the case of like America's wars in the Middle East, and like the villainization of whole groups of people, and then 9/11 as a retaliatory attack, and then the use of it as a continued reason to, um, essentially destabilize and, kill. I don't know how many thousands, tens, I don't know, tens of thousands of people in the Middle East. I don't even know. Um, and so, right, I imagine, I don't know how immediate this anthology was in the wake of 9/11. Um, but this could certainly be, an expression of an anxiety, um, that it would be used, um, you know, for capitals, for monoliths, pride as a way to continue to, you know, disrupt human connection. Uh, yeah, it is human pride and ego that disrupts our connection and our sort of like natural, um, fragile, ephemeral way of being. 1950s for the first credit cards? Wow, that's crazy. They're a product of the elite. I see. Wow, that's interesting. So credit card was nothing new. Yeah, I don't know anything, any cultural context before my time, of course. And I was born after 9/11. Um, so so were you, Asher. So that doesn't help. Um, Layers and layers of paper, skin. It's very visceral. Breaks through capitals and monoliths, through the shapes that pride makes. Find a way to trace a grand design. With living tissue, raise a structure never meant to last. Yeah, I love this notion, raising a structure never meant to last. Right, to build and to create, without doing so with an attempt to last, with an attempt to have, with an attempt to, you know, employ this sort of capitalist permanence. I think the credit card is just maybe the symbol of capitalism here, then. Um, yeah, this is great though. Do you have any other questions about this, Asher or Nikki? Um, since I'm pretty much done with it, I suppose. Um, yeah. I don't have too much more to say. It's really gorgeous. I really like this poem. Um, yeah. Yeah, this one made me this one hit me, right? And that's always good. Yeah. I don't know if that's gonna have you be prepared to like talk about this on your exam, Asher. Um, but I don't know. Go read the Tao Te Ching. It takes like 2 hours. The whole thing. You can find it for free online. Uh, at least that's the lens that I read this through. The lens of impermanence, the lens of ego. Um, but I think that's a very me interpretation of it. It's been so interesting seeing you go through this poem, and I found a new appreciation for it. And I think if it comes up in the exam, I'll be more prepared, but I still don't know what to link it to. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, and I think, when you're linking it to the idea of like conflict, right? Um, Obviously, just using Quran um, in the wake of 9/11 is probably just like a powerful thing in art, right? Given the degree of Islamophobia, even to be Muslim, like anywhere in the world, right, was like um, just meant you were basically, or anywhere in like the West meant you were experiencing like so much hate and so much threat, right? Um, and really, I think the core is maybe this like capitalism and having things, but then like the human ego to create monoliths and symbols of self, right? When we think of like empires and nations, right? It's these capitals, these monoliths, these maps, these borders that divide, that say like we are one group and you are another group, and this is how it is. Um, and that is fundamentally like born of maybe this human fear of death, this desire to be permanent. And I think there were probably a lot of people fearing for their lives after 9/11, probably particularly Muslim people, but just people in general, like after such a massive and shocking you know event where so many people died. Um, and maybe that says in some way, as you sit here fearing your death, right? Um, as you sit here fearing your death, um, do not react by holding on and trying to take more and trying to take from others in your own interest, right? Um, but maybe to exist in a gentler way, in a more soft, communal, transparent way. Well, if this was written in 9/11, the Twin Towers were certainly monoliths that didn't last. Well, yeah, um, but I think um, they're meant to, right? Um, Speaks again to that impermanence. But again, even America is a monolith that, right? I mean, this is the idea. We intend for monoliths to last, and they cannot last. They do not last. They will not last. No matter, how much effort we put into them, no matter how many stones we pile up, they will erode and degrade, and they will get hit by airplanes. Um, and and it is that entire impulse, right, that this poem speaks against, and it maybe says that it is that selfish human impulse that is like the root of conflict. Um, at least is a reading of it. Um, and if you have to compare it to another poem, right, which I think you said you had to do, um, I mean, it's interesting. It actually compares quite well in some capacity to My Last Duchess. Um, because there is this sort of like moving on impermanence, having things, having people, um, like ownership or like dominance over others at their expense is like an interesting connection to like that poem, right? Um, you could connect it and contrast it just with the other ones we've read, right? We read from your thing, um, what was it called? Remains, right? And Remains was this very violent, this very kind of shocking, right? I mean, it's a poem about shock, even about like being overwhelmed and flashbacks. So it's that more like visceral, shocking version. But at the same time, both poems are like inherently bodily, right? This is about living tissue, and that poem was about like watching people like get shot or whatever. So even right there, that's like a direct compare and contrast between those two works. Um, and I don't think I've read Ozymandias. Maybe I have. I haven't read most of the poems on your list. But right, two different depictions of the effects of the same war. One is from like a the side of someone fighting in the Middle East, right? Sort of being the oppressor um, over the minority, over like essentially the Muslim minority. And then this is a poem, like this poem is really easy to contrast maybe against the others because it's written from a Muslim perspective. Um, and so either way, this poem actually probably acts as a great counterpoint to anything else on that list. Because the majority of the other poems on that list are from white people, right? I mean, just looking at the names. Um, and it would actually be like such a power move um, if, let's say your teacher says, oh, here's Remains. And then you go, and I'm going to compare and contrast this one with Tissue, the poem that no one likes. And then you can have this great nuanced discussion of alternate sides of perspectives from a war and from a victim and oppressor. And um, that's some like that's some real analysis right there. That's some real cultural literary analysis that you know deepens your perspectives on shit. You actually never thought about it that way. Well, now you have. And I would encourage you to keep thinking about it that way because this notion of perspective, the idea of like which voices get to tell the stories, right? Um, there are um, there are stories um, that have only been told by the oppressors. There are stories that we never hear, the sort of side of those who are victimized and like the minority. Um, and so to look at a list of poems that is predominantly like white people, if not majority white men, um, this is a poem that's maybe a very um, poignant one to use as a contrast and counterpoint to almost anything on that list. um, and I would encourage you to keep thinking about that, right? Whenever we're presented narratives, whenever we're presented things in the news or in media or in books, this notion of who is writing this, what is the perspective, how is this person different than me, and how would that shape their view on reality as something different from mine? Because that's how we empathize, right? That's how we um, expand our view of the world and sort of step outside of our own existence to gain, a more nuanced, a more accurate understanding of reality as it is, rather than reality as a collection of specific narratives fed to us throughout our lives that really limit the way that we live and the way that we can understand fundamentally the world around us, right? So keep keep thinking about it that way. Um, you know, let that idea of sort of this. I like that the assignment includes this idea of comparing and contrasting, um, because comparing two things particularly that are on the same subject, um, is so valuable, right? Because fundamentally, it's playing them against each other. It's allowing the narratives to challenge each other. How do we turn ourselves into monoliths, and should we? Um, well, turning ourselves into monoliths is futile. It's wasteful, right? Because those things fail and those things fall. Um, right. Um, and like, why? Why be more than you are when what you are is already so beautiful, right? To be human and to be fragile and to die is a beautiful thing. Um, and to create a monolith, to create more for yourself, to use the resources that will endure is to take away from someone else who is living and who will live in the future, right? Um, and, um, I think it's fine to desire, like this desire to endure, right, through paper, through living tissue, when you allow yourself to carry on through story, when you allow yourself to carry on through tradition and community, um, the memory of you enriches people in the future, right? Homer created the Odyssey and told this story so potently that he has endured, but has endured in a way that has only uplifted people, right? Enriched people's minds and human experiences through his creation, right? And maybe more broadly, this says, most broadly, like a fundamental human message, right, is to uh, continue beyond death in a way that will enrich. Um, and I don't think you do so by being a monolith, by remembering your, human form, your ego, your accomplishment. It's through leaving something of genuine value, right? And that can look like a lot of different things, but it's not something that you create to sit still, right? Because to create value, it must move, it must engage, it must speak. Um, so not, uh, an American Arc de Triomphe in Washington, or whatever he's building, or statues, or um, a renovated East Wing, or whatever of the White House or something, a ballroom, right? They take. um, People, including me, hate this exam because it's so many poems. You only get one given to you in the exam, right? It's like you have to prepare more than you're tested on. Um, but I think um, I think that's really nice, right? It like the nature of the unexpectedness forces you to be ready for anything. It forces you to be prepared for any poem. Like it's a very clever way to sort of teach, um, or to test. I kind of like it myself. I would hate it in high school. I'd be like, why do I have to do this? Um, but it also maybe reflects the reality that we can learn multitudes of things and read so many poems, um, and then most of them we never, you know, we never get called on to recall that information or to use it. Um, and maybe if you consider the inherent value that you've gained from reading the other 14 poems, right? Um, if you think about them as the context in the context of poems and how much you've probably learned and how much you've maybe improved as a writer, um, then that's okay, right? It wasn't a waste. Um, and so there's that. Um, And like this is how it is. Like I read this poem, and I've read like so many books in my life, right? Um, and then like I happen to reference the Tao when analyzing this poem. Um, but there are like a thousand other books that I didn't reference that weren't called on. So it's just creating this archive of things in your mind. An hour is spent analyzing each poem, which I do value if you have a good teacher. Yeah, absolutely. Analyzing poetry is great. Unless the person trying to do so is like all dogmatic about it. Um, dogmatic? Dogma? Isn't it crazy? Dogma? Someone pointed this out to me. Is am God backwards? It's kind of crazy. um, great word. Um, anyway, I guess that's all for this one, right? That's that's Tissue by Imtiaz Darker. Um, what a lovely poem. I'm gonna read it one more time, and then I guess I'll improvise a poem because you spent 10,000 channel points on asking me to do so, so I can't refuse. um, Tissue. Paper that lets the light shine through. This is what could alter things. Paper thinned by age or touching, the kind you find in well-used books, the back of the Quran, where a hand has written in the names and histories, who was born to whom, the height and weight, who died where and how, on which sepia dates, pages smoothed and stroked and turned transparent with attention. If buildings were paper, I might feel their drift. See how easily they fall away on a sigh, a shift in the direction of the wind. Maps, too. The sun shines through their borderlines. The marks that rivers make, roads, rail tracks, mountain folds. Fine slips from grocery shops that say how much was sold and what was paid by credit card might fly our lives like paper kites. An architect could use all this. Place layer over layer, luminous, script over numbers over line, and never wish to build again with brick or block, but let the daylight break through, capitals and monoliths through the shapes that pride can make, find a way to trace a grand design with living tissue. Raise a structure never meant to last, of paper, smoothed and stroked and thinned to be transparent, turned into your skin. Last note, I love that an architect very possibly is like self-referential to the poet, right? Where Darkur is literally the architect building, right, something from all of these things in this poem, right? Making living tissue, making a living piece of paper, a poem. Isn't that cool? Isn't that so cool? Art as the thing we create, right? Also, I submitted the poem I wrote a while back that had the girl in it to the school, and I got an A+ and an award from my school. That's awesome, Asher. Congrats. I'm very happy for you that you got that. Now write a better poem. Now keep going forward, right? That's the end of that. And I mean that incredibly kindly and supportively. Like, that's really awesome, and it's very cool to get recognition, and you should absolutely be proud of that. But that means, now we go forward. Also, Ginny, you are saving this. Are you saving this anywhere? Because I think my teacher and my friends would appreciate the analysis. Yeah, I can make sure to put this one on YouTube. And I mean, I would love it if you shared it with your teacher. Absolutely, and your friends. Um, because I'm self-interested in the what would I call it? The thin and transparent thing that is my stream. uh, the this thing passed from hand to hand. Um, this sort of this sort of architecture of of thin pages, right? Of skin. I 1 billion% will. Don't worry. You will be getting thousands of views from my school. Well, I deeply appreciate it. And hopefully, um, hopefully your teacher doesn't like fuck up your grade for it. uh, but I don't think they will. Um, or you just send it to them after you've got your grade. But but I also think I feel like I established right at the beginning of the stream that like this is my opinion, and I was joking about it being your assignment and stuff. So I don't know. But yeah, if your teacher is cool and you said that they're cool, um, maybe they'll think it's cool, right? You asked me to improvise a poem. Oh, I haven't done this in a while. I haven't been doing my word association. He doesn't actually market a random person well. Okay, fair enough. Um, um, okay. Improvising a poem? Jeez. I've been thinking about mirrors a lot. It would make it pseudo improvised, but like I have this line in my head about mirrors, and um, so maybe I'll like improvise around that as a theme. Um, I could also just go full on word associate for a minute and like um, find my way to something, and it'll just be very like free. Um, I sort of like the word associating, and then maybe I'll stumble into my recent patterns of thoughts, right? Um, because that's how it tends to be, that I'm sort of subject to the subjects that I've been circling for the recent time. And it's been a lot of time since I last word associated. The amount that's passed, I don't exactly know. But and I think I stopped because my mind got kind of clogged with all the same things, and I kept feeling like I was talking about the same stuff over and over and over again, right? The circling back on myself, the looking in the mirror, that kind of thing. I'm only halfway there right now. I sound sort of poetic, but I'm just sort of rambling. Um, rambling, ambling along. It's so scary to be free, right? It's so scary to my human reactive mind to just like let the pattern flow, to just let the water drip its way down to the ocean, to swirl down into the ever shifting pool. It's like, right? It's very terrifying. OMG, in my 3 years here, I've never seen you write a poem. We're not gonna. Mirror's a wonderful service to reflect on. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm not gonna write a poem here. It's just gonna be spoken, I think. I mean, maybe we can write something down. I actually wrote a poem on stream like a week ago, because I did like a prompt sort of based on a thing, and that worked very well because I didn't have to be like genuinely like open and creative and all of that. Um, but right now I'm thinking about placing my mind in like a certain spot where it's like entirely reactive um, to sort of stimuli, because that's sort of where the real art making comes from. Okay, I'll try to start. I wonder why I was so able to like do it for like that week when I was just like word associating all the time on stream. Um, Maybe this means ego has crept back in. I'm not sure. I don't know. Or I regard Asher highly or something, and that'd be funny. Um, there's like this ego thing. There's not even anyone in chat. It's like 3 of you. Isn't that a chaos magic thing? Meditation in front of a mirror until you can't recognize yourself? Maybe. I don't know what chaos magic is in like an official sense. But I so this is kind of, well, maybe if I'm just going to launch into that, I should do it as a poem. You've brought me back here in front of the mirror again, again, again. You've brought me back to my piercing blue eyes, which wonder what it looks like when you place a mirror in front of another. You've brought me back here to the place of non-recognition, the over-repetition of a self ever-changing that I can't seem to pin down and won't. I won't. But I wonder, I won't. And it's somewhere in those eyes. Like I could learn from the darkness of a pupil what's really inside. Like this is a window, like I'm seeing through, like it's not just me reflected back or the thing I call what I project onto the image in between. Where is it? Where did it go? Was it ever there, or the things I wonder standing here? Is it over? What's underneath? What's inside? You've brought me back here to my eyes, to the bathroom countertop, to the tiles falling away, dirty, speckled, needing to be cleaned, blurry, like I'm looking through glasses, like a pair of spectacles. And that's all it is, an ambition, a creation, a more than, pride, a building, a tower, 2 eyes. Ever since, I don't know, I was 9 years old or 5, since I broke my nose and everything on my face shattered. Since every time I started looking in glass, I stopped seeing. since you started bringing me back here. And we're back here, we're back in front of the mirror again. Its eyes, its pupils, it's a nose, it's the outline of a face, once soft, now sharp, once soft, once face, once was, once is, once twice two. Eyes, pupils, teach me underneath, inside. And the hair is falling down, and the hair is cut off, and the hair is falling down, and my face is falling, and the black eyes, bags under pupils. Teach me, teacher, who are you? Mirror, 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 mirror. It's not fair. It's not fair that I can only ever be on the wall. It's not fair that you keep bringing me back here. That every window, that my cup of morning tea, that the reflecting pool reminds me of what isn't me, how unobsessed, how non-Narcissan, how empty, how once hated, once loved, now is nothing, how you bring me back here in front of the mirror. How it's always been eyes. It's always been dark spheres. It's always as black boxes, shattering glass. In a body and bone. And I'll cry there. I'll cry there, painting my self-portrait nude in words on paper, trying to write something into being, how I start crying, how I reach for the tissues, how I reach for the pen, how everything needs to be reflected, how white is glass, how mirror is blue, how blue is ink pen, how brown is enclosed in leather, in skin, in something dead and gone, how the white is bone, how the bone is broken, how the shattered is mirror, how the pieces are me, brought back here, again, 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 before, after, behind, inside, between, under, over, in, of, before, the mirror. Yeah. That's what I've been thinking about lately. Yeah, so you say, Ray, isn't that chaos meditation in front of a mirror till you can't recognize yourself? And it's pretty much always how it's been. um, this was one of the free associations that I thought sounded like a poem. Oh, you're sending an old clip. I see. Um, yeah, this one was actually a poem. I mean, it was a free free associated, right? That's the improvised poem. It's the free association within the boundaries, and that's tricky to do. Um, to control it, to not let the tangents get too far away, um, to keep bringing it back into a theme, and that's why having a refrain can be very useful in the improvised art, um, because you keep coming back to the same thing, you keep touching on the single line, um, and then you force yourself to work back to it every time, right? That reminded me of that poem, La C's in Spanish. Shit. Cuesa? La Cuesa Larga. By our old friend Nicanor. Nicanor? Freaking C's in Spanish. La Cuesa being basically a genre where two poets battle each other, and since those are usually short, the joke is that at some point they start having a hard time finding rhymes, and they basically go, yeah, yeah. And the is sort of, you know, just the reality of the improvised art. I think there's something beautiful in that, right? I mean, I think there's beauty in everything, honestly. I mean that literally. Um, there's beauty in everything, but um, uh, 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 you know, art that is created in the moment like that, um, is subject to so much humanness. It is subject to so much these sort of like meandering paths, these unexpected turns, these, inherently non-composed, inherently non sort of static thoughts. And it keeps moving. It has to keep moving, because if it stops moving, it stops being, the art, right? It's only a poem for as long as the words are on your tongue. Um, and it's, I love doing that, in that moment, right? Uh, it's one of those like dissociative out of body things where I can exist in a realm of thought and speech, and I can exist in a realm that is sort of purely in the interest of art making, right? There is no distraction there. There is just the next word and the next thought and the next idea. And the notion of, being able to go on a stage, right? And perform improvised poetry, a set of improvised poetry over improvised music, right? That's what I was trying to get to with the looping stuff, and will continue to try to get to, because I think that's, to me, that is my favorite form of art. There is so much purity in something that can only exist in a single moment, in a single time. Um, it's this true acceptance of impermanence, that like one is only the moment now, um, and that it's me and those people, and you're experiencing something that can only be experienced in this way right now, never again, cannot be reproduced, right? I cannot reproduce that poem, right? It's gone. I mean, yes, it's in the VOD, right? Yes, it exists, um, but I cannot make that again, right? It'd be so cool if someone could free do a poem to the rhythm of free jazz. People do. People do poetry with jazz. Not all the time, but it happens. Um, in fact, it's not improvised, um, but I know there are 3 albums. Maybe it's 2. Man, I haven't listened to this guy in a while. Um, what's his name? Benson Boone. Benson. No, not Benson Boone. Benjamin Boone. Right. Benson Boone is the guy. Benjamin Boone is a saxophonist. Um, Benjamin Boone. The poetry of jazz, I believe. Um, Benson Boone. Uh, the poetry of jazz. Record by Benson Boone. Benjamin Boone. Benjamin Boone. Not Benson Boone. Benjamin Boone. Um, is this album, and I think he has 3 of them or something. Um, Benjamin Boone is this jazz saxophonist, classical and jazz saxophonist, actually. Um, and then these albums also have like Branford Marsalis, Chris Potter, who are, some dope saxophone players. Um, and then it's got all these poets on it, or maybe one poet. I'm not sure. Um, and then there's The Poets Are Gathering, and then there's Benjamin Boone with the Ghana Jazz Collective, and then there's The Poetry of Jazz Volume 2. Okay, so these are all poetry and jazz albums. I really like them, particularly The Poetry of Jazz. There's some great tracks in there. But what I want to do, Asher, since you haven't been around on stream in a while, is I play the saxophone, right? And this here guy, and the alto. And what I've done a couple times on stream is live looping. So with like a loop station, you play something into it, it loops it back, until you tell it not to. To create sound, right? To create music, and then improvising poetry on top of that. It is incredibly difficult, and it's something I need to practice more and get better at. We looping? Not right now. No. We're not looping now. I'm actually going to a jazz concert later, so we are not looping now. But I know, no looping now. I'll bring back the looping. I think it really threw me off when we got the hate raid during the looping thing, during that stream. And while I'm in the midst of doing that, I'm not looking at chat at all, right? And it's sort of an issue, right? Because I don't really have moderators, right? I have 3 moderators, but none of them show up to streams. I don't know if any of you, if like Nikki or Ray, you would want to, but genuinely only if you like desire, because you 2 are around a lot, is the point. Yeah, Asher, we had a bunch of bot spam in the Discord server, and it was just like filled the entire Discord server with like transphobic stuff and whatnot. You'll be a corrupt cop. Awesome. You can say like, you can tell people you'll ban them unless they give me bits, and then I'll cut you in on that. Yeah, you saw that. I'm sorry that you saw that. Pretty fucked up, but it sucks. I'm down. I've been reporting the bots. Okay, yeah, it sounds like you're already already doing moderation then. Yeah, and I mean, the difficult thing is like, I'm only going to mod someone after they've been around for long enough and they're consistent, right? And I trust them. Like, there are people who are around often, and maybe even those people still wouldn't be people who I'd mod. Vigilante type mod, yeah. Okay, Nikki, you're a mod. Do you want it too, Ray? You've been around forever. It's only if you want to. I won't let you extort people through moderation. I'm sorry. If that changes your answer, Oh, look at you. You've got the sword, Nikki. Yeah, I'm sorry, Ray. I'm sorry. I just can't be running that kind of community here. That'd be crazy. Imagine that, right? Gift a sub now or you're getting the ban hammer, right? Fucking crazy. That's wild. Yeah, that's all for stream today, though. That's all. Let me know if you do want to be a mod, Ray, but none of that's urgent. I know it's like dumb, like y'all want to show up and like watch the stream because you enjoy it, so like being a mod is sort of like this other thing. I don't have any expectations of people as mods. It's more just like you know, you can ban something if it's here or whatever. Um, there's less of an issue because like the Discord isn't public, um, so we can't really get like Discord hate raids. But you know, especially on the music streams, I was getting a lot more like random, odd, like transphobic people. I guess maybe the music category is much less forgiving or accepting than the writing category. Um, but you know, it's whatever. I don't really. It doesn't really bother me, right? But not a good thing to just like have in chat because it, it hurts people and it's not good. Anyway, that's all for me. Thank you so much for sending that poem, Asher. I really enjoyed it. Um, I was very tired and uninspired starting stream, so I'm like, you sending that was very nice, very refreshing. The music category is the bad part of town, I guess so. I mean, it's unsurprising that the writing category is very like queer friendly or whatever. Um, and it's unsurprising that the rest of Twitch is less so. um, so there's that. Um, I would have banned that one dude who I blocked that was being very disingenuous that one time you were talking philosophy and being anti-war. Yeah, I mean that guy was annoying, right? But it actually was interesting for me to think about like how I frame my arguments and like discussing things. I sort of realized afterward um, he was doing this like sort of continual like whataboutisming, right? Um, and like deflecting the argument whenever he ran into something that he couldn't sort of like adequately respond to. And I think that was a really interesting thing because I haven't really had like a discussion like that with anyone. Not that that was much of a discussion, but I think there's like a very useful tool within discussion or debate type spaces to when someone tries to deflect, right, to sort of steer it back toward the actual point that you're making instead of like um, it's like playing whack-a-mole, right? When someone can't defend their argument, they'll just like go to a different one that they have. And if you take the bait, then you're losing, right? Um, not that I'm like necessarily interested in debating. It's just sometimes it happens. I certainly wouldn't want to be a political and philosophical debate streamer, though I might do a lot better on Twitch if I did. Poetry is probably not the most lucrative thing to be streaming. I was so in the zone for a second. I lived in this world where hate didn't exist, right? I'm so queer. I forgot people are not. I mean, it's like I feel like a non-binary worldview is so nice to have, like to sort of not um to not sort of see people as like these labels and these things and just to sort of um act under the assumption that anyone could exist in like a whatever state of being is very nice. But then there's like the startling reality that there are people who just like actively hate other people for their differences. I don't know. Jenny is the new Hassan. Could I be? The gentle Hassan, right? So when I don't think you were there for that stream, Asher. Probably not. But it was just some guy who was talking. It was very like, I don't know, maybe like just probably like American conservative, but like but like really really like a sort of probably libertarian, but not really a libertarian, like one of those like anyway. Um, uh, and we were just like having this sort of like pseudo philosophical discussion about morals, and he was sort of trying to justify like bombing kids in the Middle East. That's a very alarmist way to say it. I mean, not really, right? That's what America does. Like we're like the bombing of the Iran like girls' school had just happened, and he's just sort of anyway. So he was justifying that, um, and I was just like trying to speak very gently and softly. Um, and Hassan, Hassan like is very like shouty and like masculine, right? Strong. I can't be like that, you know. Someone comes at me with some absurd shit, and that's where I'll go to like very cool collective, like, oh yeah, like, well, what about this, you know? Um, you know, so there's that. I can't stand that dude. I just can't. Yeah, Hassan's not great, right? But at the same time, in terms of the notion of like leftists like doing coalition building and having to like get along with other leftists, like he's better than many. Of course, he's also like, I mean, he's just a whole. He's like an. I mean, he's an internet creator. He's a famous person. Like generally, we shouldn't like famous people, I think. Um, but at the same time, he's probably done a lot to like get people into like further left politics and like democratic socialism and these sort of ideas. Um, yeah. Why are people pro-war or anything like that in general? I don't get it. Um, because why are people pro-war? Probably lots of reasons, right? There are people at the top who directly get value out of going to war, but then like the little guy usually has been fed a narrative about how like there's some threat to him or her or them. The little guy, the little one, the the member of the, you know, the average human who's not a billionaire, right? Usually they've been fed a narrative that there is some minority group who's a threat to them, and that's either, you know, like brown people or people of another religion or people from across that border or this place or um, whatever, right? Or people from that other sect of this religion or, um, you know, and then so you say, okay, well, these people are bad and they're a threat, and then they get fed the narrative that the you know, as an American or as a Western person, the notion is that like you solve these things through like colonial war action. Now, from like a non-white perspective, there are a number of reasons, right? Someone might be pro-war because they are pro the defense of their um, their home, right? But they're not pro the war, right? They don't want the war to be happening, but perhaps they, you know, in a sense, are going to go do war and do war the best that they can, which is maybe a a very strong reinterpretation of the definite of like the word pro-war, um, but certainly like voluntarily, well, maybe not voluntarily, but you know, participating um, and putting an effort in toward a war effort, you know, to genuinely defend themselves. Um, I don't think that's really what we mean when we say pro-war, but it's an interesting perspective. War accompanies us throughout life and history. It is fundamentally a human institution and will never disappear. Yeah, like poverty in the gospel, we can only manage it better or worse, probably. But we can still dislike it, right? I always think of that. I always think of it as you wouldn't want your brother to die. Why do you want someone else's brother to die? Yeah, right. Um, but then you get all this like geopolitics stuff and these like, how do you deal with the fact of like a land that is colonially settled, right? A land where people still cannot live their lives freely as they wish, not under um, the black boot of the IDF. um, so, right, there's like, we can all dislike war, and then there's like the reality of like wars, right? And that's a difficult thing. And Ray, obviously, the more materialist, says, you know, um, wars are wars are going to happen. I want nothing more than the impossible. I, who most modestly aside, fill the world, the largest and least edible fish. I, who modestly aside, fill the world, the largest and least edible fish, to make war and peace on half the world, To make war and peace on half the world and the other half indestructible. Plague of the poor, horror of vag. It's a wild quote, and I don't know what it means. I want nothing more than the impossible. I, who, modesty aside, fill the world, the largest and least edible fish. We have 2 colons. To make war in to make war in peace on half the world and the other half indestructible. Plague the poor. That's quite the effort to even just like map that sentence grammatically. Am I dumb? Short-sighted selfishness, maybe. Everything affects everyone all the time. If you think that it doesn't, you're living in a dreamland. I'm not aiming this at you, by the way. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, now I'm actually gonna end the stream. I know. It's so sad. Y'all's internet person, the mirror, the face that you project onto, is leaving for today. And if you would like an adequate replacement, I suggest you go look in the mirror and consider whether that which lies beneath your eyes is something capable of acting in this world, whether you have agency at all, whether that's a construct of your mind. And if you don't want to do that, I suggest looking at the mirror and trying to write a poem, not about what you see, not about what's there, but rather to write a poem that we'll say expresses the spirit of that experience, as a painting would express the spirit of its subject. Good luck on your exam, Asher. And regardless of the exam, regardless of if you do well or not, and I'm sure you will do well, regardless of which poem you get assigned on your exam, keep making poetry you love. Keep making art you love. And two, keep finding beauty in the world. Those are the 2 pieces of advice that I think kind of work. Thanks for watching.